Daeho Kim was having a good night. His fingers moved quickly over his keyboard as he played his favorite game. On screen, his character dodged attacks and fired back at enemies. The clock on his wall showed 2:08 a.m., but Daeho wasn't tired. At 28 years old, he had spent most of his life playing games late into the night. Just one more round, he said to himself, reaching for his energy drink. His small apartment in Seoul was quiet except for the clicking of his keyboard and the game sounds from his headphones. Daeho hadn't always been a gamer. For 3 years, he had served as an engineer in the military. There, he learned how to stay calm under pressure and how to solve problems quickly. These skills made him even better at games when he returned to civilian life. Suddenly, a bright light filled his room. It was so bright that Daeho had to close his eyes. He thought a light bulb had burst, but when he opened his eyes again, he wasn't in his apartment anymore. What the? Daeho stood in a strange metal room. The walls were smooth and gave off a faint blue glow. The floor felt cold under his bare feet. He was still wearing his t-shirt and sweatpants from his gaming session. He turned in a full circle, looking for a door. "Hello? Is anyone there?" His voice echoed in the empty chamber. A section of the wall slid open, and Daeho stepped back in, surprise. 2 tall, thin figures entered the room. They had gray skin that seemed to shimmer under the blue light. Their heads were large with huge black eyes that reminded Daeho of the aliens from old movies. Each had 6 long fingers on each hand. "Okay, this is new," Daeho said calmly. He didn't feel afraid, just curious. "Very impressive graphics. The VR is seamless." The aliens looked at each other, their expressions unreadable. One of them raised what looked like a small silver tube and pointed it at Daeho. A beam of light shot out and scanned him from head to toe. "English language detected. Translator activated," said one of the aliens in a flat voice. "Human male. Age, 28. Earth years. Physical condition, above average. Mental state, unusually calm," said the other. Daeho smiled. "Wow. Even voice acting. This must be the most advanced game I've ever seen. How did you get me out of my chair, though? Some kind of haptic suit?" The aliens ignored his questions. "Follow," commanded the taller one, turning to exit through the door. Daeho shrugged and followed them. "I guess this is the tutorial section," he muttered. Commander Yule stood in the control room of the research vessel, watching the human on the large screen. The human walked between 2 guards, looking around with obvious interest rather than fear. "Is this the one you selected, Science Officer Ji-un?" Yule asked, turning to his second-in-command. Ji-un nodded. She was shorter than Yule, but had the same gray skin and large eyes. "Yes, Commander. This human shows high intelligence and adaptability scores. He has military training, but is currently a civilian engaged in competitive electronic simulations. His psychological profile suggests he will provide valuable data." Yule studied the human on the screen. "He seems unusually calm for an abducted specimen. Most species show extreme fear responses." "Humans are different," Ji-un said. "The Galactic Council classified them as a curiosity species for good reason. Their responses often defy our predictions." Yule made a dismissive gesture with his 6-fingered hand. "Nevertheless, all species have breaking points. The Council wants to know humanity's limits before deciding whether they pose a threat to galactic peace." "And if they do pose a threat?" Ji-un asked quietly. Yule's large eyes narrowed. "Then appropriate measures will be taken." Daeho was led through long corridors that curved gently. The walls had the same metallic blue glow as the first room. He passed what looked like windows showing a view of stars against the blackness of space. "Nice touch with the space theme," Daeho commented. "But I've played enough sci-fi games to know these are just screens." His guards remained silent as they guided him to a larger chamber. Inside, more of the gray aliens moved around what looked like control panels. In the center of the room stood a taller alien with markings on its chest. "Welcome, human," said the alien with the markings. "I am Commander Yule of the Trellix research vessel Starseeker." Daeho nodded politely. "Nice to meet you. I'm Daeho. Kim. Great intro sequence so far. When does the actual gameplay start?" Commander Yule tilted his head. You do not understand. This is not a game. You have been selected for important research. Daeho laughed. Right. You have been chosen. Classic game opening. Let me guess. I need to save the universe or something? A female Trellick stepped forward. Commander, the subject appears to be experiencing denial, a common human defense mechanism. I'm not in denial, Daeho said. This is obviously a new kind of immersive game experience. The graphics are amazing, and the alien designs are really good. But you can't expect me to believe I've actually been abducted by aliens, Commander. Yule made a gesture, and a section of the floor became transparent. Below, Daeho could see the curved surface of Earth, blue oceans and swirling white clouds clearly visible. Oh wow, Daeho breathed. That's incredible. The detail is amazing. He crouched down to look more closely at the view. Best space game ever. Ji-un, prepare him for the first trial, Yule ordered, clearly frustrated by the human's reaction. The female Trellix nodded and approached Daeho. Human, you will now undergo a series of tests designed to measure your species' capabilities. Daeho stood up, his eyes bright with excitement. The first level. Great. Let's get started. What kind? Of tests, puzzles, combat? You will face challenges designed to test your physical and mental limits, Ji-un explained. Your performance will help us understand humanity's potential. So it's like a benchmark test, Daeho said, nodding. Makes sense. You want to adjust the difficulty based on how I do. Ji-un looked at Commander Yule with an expression that might have been confusion. Yule made another gesture and two guards approached with what looked like a tight-fitting suit. Put this on, one guard ordered, handing the suit to Daeho. Player skin unlocked already? Nice. Daeho took the suit and examined it. It was made of a material he didn't recognize, smooth like silk but firm like rubber. Do I get to customize it later? Ji-un sighed. The monitoring suit will record your biological responses during the trials. Oh, like a heart rate monitor for VR fitness games. Smart. Daeho began to put on the suit over his clothes. As Daeho dressed, Commander Yule spoke quietly to Ji-un. I have never seen a subject react this way. Is he mentally damaged? Ji-un watched Daeho with interest. No, Commander. I believe this is what humans call gaming mindset. Their entertainment often involves voluntary stress and challenge. He thinks this is all part of a game, and that belief is protecting him from fear. Interesting, Yule said. Perhaps this will make the data even more valuable. Let us see how long he maintains this belief when the real pain begins. Daeho finished putting on the suit and stretched his arms. Fits perfectly. So what's first? Yule stepped forward. The first trial begins now. May your species prove worthy. A door opened in the wall, revealing a dimly lit corridor. Through there? Daeho asked, already walking toward it. Let me guess. Tutorial level. Don't worry, I rarely die in the first level. As Daeho disappeared into the corridor, Ji-un turned to Yule. Commander, I suggest we proceed with caution. This human's response is unusual. Proceed as planned, Yule ordered. All species break eventually, even those who think they're playing a game. The door closed behind Daeho, and the testing began. Daeho walked down the dimly lit corridor. The suit he wore felt strange against his skin, but it was comfortable enough. The path ahead curved gently, and the blue lights on the floor guided his way. Pretty good level design, he said to himself. The atmosphere is perfect. The corridor ended at a round door that slid open as he approached. Daeho stepped through into a large, empty room with high ceilings. The floor was made of the same metal as the rest of the ship, but it had strange markings on it. Hello? Daeho called out. What's the challenge here? A voice spoke from nowhere. It was Ji-un, the female Trellix. Human subject. This is the first trial. It will test your physical endurance. Got it. Endurance test. Like a stamina challenge, Daeho nodded, bouncing on his toes to warm up. I'm ready. Without warning, the room began to heat up. Daeho felt the temperature rise quickly. Soon sweat appeared on his forehead and began to soak through the suit. "Environmental hazards, nice touch," he said, wiping his brow. "Is there an objective, or do I just need to survive?" No answer came. The heat continued to rise until Daeho's throat felt dry and his skin burned. He remembered his military training for desert conditions. Need to conserve energy and find the coolest spot in the room. He muttered to himself. He moved to the edge of the room and sat down, slowing his breathing to reduce his body heat. In the control room, Commander Yul and Ji-eun watched Daeho on the screen. Other Trellick scientists monitored his vital signs. "Temperature now at 45 Earth degrees Celsius," reported one of the scientists. "Most species show severe distress at this level. The human's heart rate is elevated but within normal stress parameters," said another. "He appears to be using survival techniques." Yul leaned forward, his large eyes fixed on the screen. "Increase to 50 degrees. Ji-eun looked concerned. "Commander, that approaches the lethal threshold for humans. We need to find their limits," Yul said firmly. "Proceed." The heat became almost unbearable. Daeho now lay flat on the floor, which was slightly cooler than the air. His military training taught him that in extreme heat, you should minimize movement and find any way to reduce your body temperature. "This game doesn't mess around with the difficulty," he gasped. "But I've beaten heat levels before." Just as Daeho felt he might pass out, the temperature suddenly dropped. The change was so rapid that he shivered violently. Within minutes, the room became freezing cold. "Whoa, plot twist," Daeho exclaimed, his breath visible in the frigid air. From fire to ice. Classic elemental challenge. The cold bit into his skin, and his fingers began to feel numb. Again, his military training kicked in. He started to move around the room, doing jumping jacks and push-ups to keep his blood flowing. "Gotta keep moving," he said between breaths. "Can't let the game win that easily." "Remarkable," said one of the Trellick scientists. "The human is deliberately increasing his physical activity to combat the cold." Yul watched with interest. "Most species curl up and wait for death in extreme cold. Humans evolved on a planet with many different climates," Ji-eun explained. "They developed various strategies for survival." "His vital signs?" Yul asked. "Stressed but stable," replied the scientist. "He is handling the cold better than the heat." Yul made a note on his datapad. "Move to the gravitational test." The temperature in the room returned to normal, and Daeho stopped exercising. He was catching his breath when he felt a strange pressure on his body. It was as if gravity had increased, pulling him down toward the floor. "Whoa. Gravity settings," he said, struggling to stay standing. "This is getting interesting." The pressure increased until Daeho could barely lift his arms. He dropped to one knee, then both knees, fighting to stay upright. "This must be, at least, twice Earth gravity," he grunted. "Good thing I didn't skip leg day." The gravity continued to increase. Daeho was now flat on the floor, barely able to move. But instead of panicking, he began to crawl inch by inch toward the center of the room. "Every game has a goal," he gasped. "Center of the room must be important." Senior researcher Han entered the control room and stood beside Yul. "Commander, I heard we have an unusual subject." Yul gestured to the screen. "See for yourself." The human treats each trial as a challenge to overcome rather than torture to endure. Han watched as Daeho struggled toward the center of the room. What is he doing? The gravitational force is the same throughout the chamber. He believes there is a goal to each trial, Ji-eun explained. He thinks this is a game with rules and objectives. Fascinating, Han said, and it seems to be helping him survive. His mind is focused on winning rather than suffering. Yul nodded. Let's see how he handles the next phase. Just as Daeho reached the center of the room, the gravity returned to normal. He lay on his back, breathing heavily, his muscles sore from the effort. Level cleared, he panted. Wonder what's next. A section of the floor opened beside him and a platform rose up. On it was a simple table with what looked like a metal helmet. Ah, power up or cutscene, Daeho said, getting to his feet. He approached the table and examined the helmet. Probably. Gives game instructions or story background. A voice spoke again. Human subject, place the neural interface on your head. Neural interface? Fancy name for a VR headset. Deho smiled. He picked up the helmet and put it on. Immediately, a jolt of pain shot through his body. Deho gasped and staggered back, but he didn't remove the helmet. Whoa, pain feedback, that's intense, he exclaimed. The pain faded quickly. Must be to simulate damage in the game. Pretty realistic. He thinks the pain inducer is part of the game experience, Han said in disbelief. Jiun nodded. Humans have entertainment that deliberately causes stress, fear, and the illusion of danger. They call them thrill rides or horror games. Increase the intensity, Yule ordered. Let's see how much game he can endure. The helmet sent another stronger shock through Deho's body. This time he couldn't help but cry out in pain. It felt like every nerve was on fire. When it stopped, he took a deep breath. Okay, that was a bit much, but I get it. The game is testing my pain threshold. He noticed that the shock seemed to come in a pattern. 3 seconds on, 2 seconds off, then 5 seconds on. After a few cycles, Deho began to time his movements between the shocks. It's just a rhythm game, he told himself. Move during the safe periods, brace during the shock periods. He's adapting to the pain inducer, said one of the scientists. He's identified the pattern and is working around it. Yule's eyes narrowed. Randomize the pattern. The shocks became unpredictable. Sometimes they were short and mild, other times long and intense. Deho found it harder to time his movements, but he didn't give up. Increasing difficulty, he grunted during a brief pause. That's fair for level progression. After what seemed like hours, the helmet finally powered down. Deho removed it and placed it back on the table, his hands shaking slightly. That was challenging, he said, wiping sweat from his face. But I think I passed. The door on the far side of the room slid open, revealing a new corridor. Next level unlocked, Deho said with a tired smile. He took a moment to catch his breath, then walked toward the door. Let's see what's next in this crazy game. As he exited, he heard the female Trellick's voice again. Physical trials complete. Preparing mental challenges. Deho gave a thumbs up to the ceiling, assuming there were cameras watching him. Bring it on, I love puzzle levels. Deho followed the new corridor, rolling his shoulders to ease the soreness from the physical trials. Despite the pain he had endured, his eyes were bright with excitement. I wonder what the puzzle levels will be like, he said to himself. Probably some maze or riddles. The corridor ended at another door. This one was larger than the others and had strange symbols carved into its surface. Deho examined them with interest. Cool alien language. Wish I could read it, he said, reaching out to touch one of the symbols. As his fingers brushed the symbol, the door slid open. Deho stepped through into darkness. The door closed behind him, leaving him in complete blackness. Whoa, he said, blinking as his eyes tried to adjust. Stealth level? Suddenly the floor beneath him lit up with a faint blue glow. The light spread outward, revealing a massive room filled with walls and pathways. Deho realized he was standing at the entrance to an enormous maze. I knew it, a maze level, he said with a grin. Classic game design. In the control room, Yule, Ji-un, and Han watched as Deho took his first steps into the labyrinth. This is our most advanced psychological test, Han explained. The walls can move and rearrange themselves. Most subjects become disoriented and distressed within minutes. The human's heart rate is elevated, but within normal parameters for mild excitement, reported a scientist monitoring Deho's vital signs. He seems almost happy, Ji-un noted with confusion. Yule leaned forward. Activate the first reconfiguration sequence. Deho had made it about 20 steps into the maze when he heard a low rumbling sound. The walls around him began to shift and move, changing the paths. Awesome. Dynamic environment, he exclaimed. This game keeps getting better. Instead of being frightened by the changing paths, Deho watched carefully, trying to spot patterns in the movement. When the walls settled, he continued forward with confidence. If this is like other maze games, there must be a map or markers somewhere, he said, examining the walls as he walked. He noticed small glowing dots at some of the intersections. They were easy to miss unless you were looking for them. Aha! Breadcrumb trail, he said triumphantly. Just need to follow these to find the exit. He found the maintenance markers, Ji-un said with surprise. Those aren't meant to be part of the test. Han checked his datapad. Those are just reference points for our systems to track the maze configuration. They shouldn't be visible to the subject. The human's visual acuity must be higher than we anticipated, Yul said. Remove the markers and initiate the optical illusion sequence. As Daeho followed the glowing dots, they suddenly disappeared. At the same time, the walls of the maze began to shimmer and distort. What had been straight corridors now appeared to bend and twist. The floor seemed to tilt and shift under his feet. Whoa, trippy effects, Daeho said, staggering slightly. Like those optical illusion levels in puzzle games. He stopped and closed his eyes for a moment, taking deep breaths. When he opened them again, the distortions were still there, but he had a plan. Can't trust my eyes, so I'll use touch instead, he said. He moved to the left wall and placed his hand on it. Old maze-solving trick. Keep one hand on the wall and follow it. You might not take the shortest path, but you'll find the exit eventually. With his hand sliding along the wall, Daeho began to make steady progress through the maze despite the visual distortions trying to confuse him. Remarkable problem-solving skills, Ji-un observed. He's using the wall-following algorithm. A simple but effective approach, Han agreed. Many species never think of it. Yul didn't look impressed. He's still treating this as a game too. P1. Increase the psychological pressure. Add the fear elements. Daeho had been following the wall for several minutes when he heard strange sounds echoing through the maze. At first they were just soft whispers, but they grew louder and more distinct. They sounded like growls and hisses from unseen creatures. Audio cues, Daeho noted. The game is trying to distract me with scary sounds. The sounds got closer, and soon Daeho could see shadows moving at the edge of his vision. When he turned to look directly at them, they vanished, only to reappear when he looked away. Nice horror game elements, he said with a nervous laugh. The designers really went all out. Suddenly, a large shape appeared at the end of the corridor. It looked like a tall, shadowy creature with glowing red eyes and long, sharp claws. It let out a terrifying screech and began moving toward Daeho. Whoa! Enemy NPC! Daeho exclaimed. His heart raced, but instead of running away in terror, he studied the creature's movements. Let's see what your attack pattern is. The creature charged forward, slashing with its claws. Daeho ducked and rolled to the side, avoiding the attack. The creature turned and prepared to attack again. Telegraphed attacks, 3-second cooldown, Daeho muttered as he dodged again. I can work with this? He's analyzing the fear projections. As if they were game opponents, Han said, watching the screen in disbelief. His adrenaline and cortisol levels are high, reported the monitoring scientist, but his brain activity shows focus, not panic. This is unprecedented, Ji-un said. Most subjects are reduced to terrified immobility by these projections. Yul's large eyes narrowed. Add more creatures. Overwhelm him. More shadowy creatures appeared in the maze. Daeho now faced 5 of them, each with different appearances and attack styles. One was fast but weak, another slow but powerful, a third could jump over walls, and so on. Multiple enemy types, Daeho said, breathing hard as he dodged between them. This is like a raid boss fight now. He named them as he fought: Speedy, Tank, Jumper, Screamer, and Shadow. By observing their movements, he learned when to dodge, when to run, and when to stand his ground. The AI in this game is incredible, he said aloud, knowing he was being monitored. Very realistic enemy behavior. Instead of trying to fight the creatures, Daeho focused on evading them while continuing to follow the wall with his hand. Gradually, he made progress through the maze. Researcher Min entered the control room and approached Yul. Commander, I've analyzed the human's brain activity. He's producing high levels of dopamine. Dopamine? Yul asked. Isn't that a stress hormone in humans? No, Commander, Min explained. It's a pleasure chemical. It's released during enjoyable activities. This human is actually enjoying the experience. Yul looked shocked. How can he enjoy something designed to cause fear and distress? Ji-un had been studying human culture more deeply. Humans have entertainment specifically designed to frighten them. They call them horror games or thrill rides. They deliberately seek out controlled fear for pleasure. That makes no evolutionary sense, Han said, shaking his head. And yet it appears to be true, Ji-un replied, gesturing to the screen where Daeho was still making his way through the maze, a determined smile on his face despite the terrifying creatures around him. After what seemed like hours, Daeho finally reached a large circular chamber in the center of the maze. The creatures had stopped following him at the entrance to this room. Final boss arena, Daeho said, catching his breath. Wonder what's coming next? In the center of the chamber was a pedestal with a glowing orb. The orb pulsed with a soft light that changed colors slowly. Quest item or key item, Daeho guessed, approaching the pedestal cautiously. A voice spoke from above. It was Ji-un again. Human subject, you have reached the central chamber. The final mental challenge awaits. Bring it on, Daeho said with a tired but eager smile. I'm ready for the next level. The orb's light intensified, and Daeho felt a strange sensation in his mind, as if something was reaching inside his thoughts. Neural interface activation, Ji-un's voice explained. Prepare for deep psychological analysis. Mind reading? Daeho said, his eyes widening. Now that's advanced gameplay. As the light from the orb enveloped him, Daeho had no idea that the true test was only just beginning. The light from the orb grew brighter until Daeho could see nothing else. He felt a strange pulling sensation in his mind, as if someone was opening drawers and looking through his memories. Whoa, he said softly. This is some next-level VR. Suddenly, the light faded and Daeho found himself standing in his childhood home in Seoul. Everything was exactly as he remembered it. The worn couch where his father used to sit, his mother's plants by the window, the small table where they ate dinner. Together. Amazing graphics, Daeho whispered, reaching out to touch the wall. It felt solid and real. The detail is incredible. He heard voices from the kitchen, familiar voices that made his heart beat faster. He walked slowly toward the sound and saw his parents just as they looked when he was 10 years old. Mom? Dad? He said, knowing they weren't real but still feeling a lump in his throat. His parents turned to look at him, but their faces changed. Their eyes grew cold, and their expressions turned angry. You failed us, his mother said, her voice harsh and unlike her real voice. We sacrificed everything for you, his father added, and you wasted it all playing games. Daeho stepped back, surprised by the sudden shift. This is psychological warfare. The game is using my memories against me. His parents' faces began to twist and distort, becoming monstrous versions of themselves. They moved toward him with clawed hands. Interesting approach, Daeho said, backing away. Using personal fears as game enemies. Very advanced. In the control room, the Trellix watched Daeho's reactions with growing frustration. His heart rate increased briefly, but he's already calming down, researcher Min reported. He's rationalizing the simulation as game elements. Commander Yul slammed, his six-fingered hand on the console. How is this possible? The neural scanner extracts the subject's deepest fears and insecurities. No species has ever maintained composure through this test. Ji-un studied the brain activity readings carefully. It appears that humans have developed psychological defenses we didn't anticipate. He recognizes these as artificial simulations and separates them from reality. Push deeper, Yul ordered. Find his breaking point. The scene around Daeho changed again. Now he stood in a military training field. He recognized it immediately. This was where the accident happened. He saw himself, 3 years younger, standing by a testing facility for experimental equipment. His fellow soldiers moved around him, including his best friend, Minho. No, Daeho whispered, knowing what was about to happen. Not this. He watched as his younger self made a calculation error while testing new equipment. There was a flash of light and then chaos, people screaming, running. Minho on the ground, not moving. "This isn't fair," Daeho said, his voice shaking, using my worst memory as a game level. But even as his hands trembled and his eyes filled with tears, a part of his mind remained detached. "This is just like those psychological horror games," he told himself, taking deep breaths. "They show you your worst fears and guilt. It's not real. It's just code and graphics." The scene replayed again and again, each time showing how Daeho could have prevented the accident if he had been more careful, if he had checked his calculations one more time. "I know what happened," Daeho said, his voice stronger now. "I've lived with this guilt for years. This game isn't showing me anything I haven't told myself 1,000 times." To the surprise of the watching Trellix, instead of breaking down, Daeho walked toward the scene of the accident. He knelt beside the image of his injured friend. "I'm sorry, Minho," he said quietly. "I made a mistake that day. A terrible mistake. But you survived and you forgave me even though I couldn't forgive myself." The simulation flickered, as if confused by his response. "This isn't working the way you planned, is it?" Daeho said, looking up at the sky, addressing the game designers he assumed were watching. "You want me to break down, but this is actually helping me face my guilt. It's like therapy." In the control room, the Trellix were silent with shock. "He's using the simulation to process his trauma," Ji-un said quietly. "I've never seen anything like it." "His stress levels are elevated," Min reported, "but they're actually decreasing now. He's healing." Yule paced the room, his long fingers twitching with frustration. "This species doesn't respond normally to anything. Try the final scenario." The scene changed again. This time, Daeho found himself floating in space, alone among the stars. The Earth was visible far below him, but he was drifting away from it with no way to return. "Isolation scenario," Daeho said, recognizing the tactic. "Classic fear trigger," a voice spoke from nowhere and everywhere. "You are alone, human. You will always be alone." Daeho laughed. "Nice try. But gamers spend hours alone by choice, we're used to it." The voice continued, growing harsher. "No one will remember you. Your life has no meaning. Your species is insignificant in the vast universe." Instead of being frightened, Daeho looked at the stars with wonder. "You know, I've always wanted to see space up close. The graphics here are amazing. Look at all those stars." He spread his arms wide, as if embracing the vastness around him. "If this is supposed to make me feel small and scared, you don't understand humans very well. We've been looking up at the stars for thousands of years, wondering what's out there. This is awesome." In the control room, Yule stood motionless, his large eyes fixed on the screen. "He's enjoying it," Ji-un said, her voice filled with wonder. "The final fear scenario designed to break the subject's spirit, and he's enjoying it. His dopamine levels are higher than at any previous point," Min reported. "He's experiencing joy." Han shook his head in disbelief. "How is this possible? Every species we've tested has broken under these simulations." "Because humans are different," Ji-un said quietly. "They've been testing themselves with games and stories that simulate fear, pain, and loss for their entire history. They deliberately seek out experiences that other species avoid." Yule turned to face his team. "What are you saying?" Ji-un looked up from her readings. "I'm saying we may have made a serious error in judgment. Humans don't just endure suffering, they've turned it into entertainment. What other species could do that?" The space simulation faded, and Daeho found himself back in the central chamber of the maze. The orb on the pedestal was dim now, as if exhausted. Daeho took a deep breath, feeling strangely refreshed despite everything he had just experienced. "That was intense," he said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Best psychological horror game I've ever played. The graphics were amazing, and using my own memories was genius." A door opened on the far side of the chamber, revealing a new corridor. "Next level unlocked," Daeho said with a tired smile. "I wonder what's next." As he walked toward the door, he felt different somehow. Facing his worst memory had been painful but also strangely healing. For years he had avoided thinking about the accident, but now he had confronted it directly. If this is what the game designers wanted, he muttered, to help players face their fears, then it's pretty brilliant. He stepped through the doorway, unaware that his captors were now watching him with a mixture of fear and awe. Level completed, Deho said, rolling his shoulders. Bring on the final boss. Deho walked down a long, straight corridor. Unlike the others, this one was brightly lit with white light. The walls were smooth and plain, with no markings or features. Interesting design choice, Deho said to himself. Usually games get more complex toward the end, not simpler. His body ached from the physical trials and his mind felt tired from the psychological tests, but he kept moving forward. After all he had been through, he was curious to see how this strange game would end. The corridor ended at a round white door. Unlike the other doors on the ship, this one had a simple handle. Deho reached out and turned it, pushing the door open. He stepped into a large circular room filled with control panels, screens, and strange equipment. In the center of the room was a raised platform where Commander Yule stood with Ji-Yoon and several other Trellics. Whoa, Deho said, looking around. Is this the control room, the final boss arena? Yule turned to face him, his large eyes studying Deho with what seemed like caution. Human, Yule said, his voice calm but tense. You have completed all our tests. No species has ever done this before. Deho grinned and pumped his fist in the air. Yes, I beat the game. I knew I could do it. Ji-Yoon stepped forward. Deho Kim, there is something you need to understand. This is not a game. Deho laughed. Right. Stay in character until the end. I appreciate the commitment to immersion. No, Ji-Yoon insisted. This is real. We are the Trellics, a species from another star system. We abducted you to study human responses to stress and pain. Deho's smile faded slightly. He looked around the room more carefully, noticing details he had missed before. The aliens looked tired and concerned. Some of them were watching him with what seemed like fear. Wait, he said slowly. Are you serious? This isn't a game? You actually abducted me from Earth? Yule nodded. Yes. We were testing human limitations for the Galactic Council. They need to assess whether your species poses a threat to Galactic's peace. Deho blinked several times, trying to process this information. So the pain, the fear, that was all real? You were actually trying to torture me? Yes, Ji-Yoon admitted. But you responded in a way no other species ever has. You treated it as entertainment. Deho stood silently for a moment. Then, to everyone's surprise, he started laughing. I'm sorry, he said, trying to catch his breath. But that's the funniest thing I've ever heard. You kidnapped me to torture me, and I thought I was playing the best game ever made. In a secure area of the ship, other Trellic scientists were discussing their findings with growing concern. The human showed no sign of breaking under any test, one scientist reported. Physical pain, psychological stress, fear scenarios. Nothing worked. What does that tell us about their species? Asked another. It suggests humans have evolved to endure and even enjoy conditions that would destroy the minds of other species, the first scientist explained. If they're all like this one, they could be nearly impossible to control. We need to wipe his memory and return him to Earth, the second scientist decided. The Council needs this information immediately. The scientist activated a control panel, preparing the memory wipe procedure. Back in the control room, Deho was still trying to understand his situation when suddenly an alarm began to sound. Red lights flashed on the control panels. What's happening? Yule demanded, turning to one of the technicians. Someone is attempting to access the memory wipe procedure, the technician reported. But there's a malfunction. The system is overloading. Stop it, Yule ordered. Shut it down. But it was too late. Sparks flew from one of the control panels, and several screens went dark. Neural interface system failing, the technician reported. The connection with the human is still active. He's getting feedback from our computers. Deho felt a strange tingling in his head. Suddenly he could see information, symbols, diagrams, and images, flowing through his mind like a river. It made no sense to him, but somehow his brain was processing it. "Whoa," he said, pressing his hands to his temples. "Developer mode unlocked? Cheat codes activated?" The information flowing into his mind included ship schematics, security protocols, and most importantly, the location of other humans being kept in stasis pods for future testing. "There are more people here," Deho said, his eyes wide. "You have other humans?" Yul turned to Jiun. "How does he know that? The information is encrypted." "His brain must be interpreting the data stream somehow," Jiun replied. "The neural interface works differently with humans." Deho suddenly felt like he understood the ship's systems. It was like when he learned a new game. The controls would feel awkward at first, but soon his fingers would know what to do without thinking. "I need to free them," he said firmly. He stepped toward a control panel and began pressing buttons and switches. "Stop him," Yul ordered, but when the guards moved toward Deho, he accessed the security systems and sealed the doors. "Sorry," Deho said, not looking up from the panel. "I'm using the admin controls now." Throughout the ship, stasis pods hissed open. Confused humans sat up, looking around in fear and wonder. Emergency lights guided them toward escape pods. In the engine room, cooling systems shut down, causing the main drive to overheat and automatically power down. On the bridge, navigation, officers watched in horror as their controls locked up, displaying a simple message in their language. Game over. In the control room, Yul watched helplessly as Deho took control of his ship. "How is this possible?" Yul demanded. "How can one human do this?" "Because," Deho said, looking up from the controls with a grin, "I'm not just any human. I'm a gamer and an engineer. This is what I do." He finished entering commands and stepped back from the panel. "I've sent a signal to Earth with your ship's location. I've also disabled your engines and weapons systems." Jiun looked at him with new respect. "What happens now?" Deho shrugged. "Now we wait for my people to come get me and the others. Don't worry. I didn't damage life support or artificial gravity. I'm not a monster." He found a chair and sat down, suddenly feeling very tired. "I have to say, though, this was the best game I've ever played. 10 out of 10 would recommend to friends." 3 days later, a human ship docked with the disabled Trellix vessel. Soldiers and diplomats boarded, finding the aliens cooperative and surprisingly respectful. Deho met the human captain in the Trellix control room. "You're a hero, Mr. Kim," the captain said, shaking his hand. "Your signal was the first confirmed contact with alien intelligence in human history." Deho smiled. "I was just trying to beat the game." As the humans prepared to leave, taking the freed captives with them, Jiun approached Deho one last time. "The Galactic Council will receive our report," she said. "We will tell them that humans are unique among all species we have encountered." "How so?" Deho asked. "You turn suffering into entertainment. You seek out fear for pleasure. You treat torture as a game," Jiun explained. "No other species does this. It makes you unpredictable." Deho thought about this for a moment. "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" Jiun's large eyes blinked slowly. "It means the Council will likely recommend that the galaxy leaves humans alone. You are too interesting to interfere with." Deho laughed. "So we scared you by not being scared?" "Precisely," Jiun said. "Farewell, Deho Kim. Thank you for playing our game." As Deho boarded the human ship and headed home, he couldn't help but wonder what other games might be waiting out among the stars. Whatever they were, he was ready to play. And somewhere in the vast reaches of space, the Galactic Council received a message. Regarding humans, approach with extreme caution, or better yet, leave them alone. They think torture is fun,